Welcome to Straight Talk Vermont with Linda Joy Sullivan. Thank you, NEK-TV, for actually allowing us to do this show. To the people out there who are listening, I want you to meet Michael Keane, who is our featured guest. Michael is a member of VEPC, and we're going to allow Michael to give us a little bit of background about himself before we get started. Thank you so much, Michael, for joining us. And would you please tell our listeners a little bit about your background, VEPC, and then we'll dive into TIF and CHIP.
Absolutely. Are we listeners, or are we viewers, or are we both?
Both.
Both. Well, I'm Michael Keane. I'm originally a kid from Brooklyn. I'm no longer a kid, but I'm still from Brooklyn. I've been in Vermont about 20 years. What else can I tell you? I have a fairly good international background. I've lived and worked in about 5 different countries, and one of those countries, Norway, where I worked for about 9 years. I learned a lot about the world in different ways, and came back to the States and began to work in Wall Street and in management consulting. And at a given point, my wife and I, my late wife, Edie Sawitsky, and I found our way to Vermont and fell in love with it. We thought we'd buy a house here and come up on the weekends, or we'd come up here and go back to New Jersey on the weekends or whatever. And after about 2 months living in the house, rather than packing the dogs and ourselves in the car and going back to New Jersey, we said, what the hell are we doing this for? Put the house for sale in New Jersey, and then moved up here permanently.
We're so glad you did.
Well, I am too, as a matter of fact. It's a nice place. I have served on the Bennington. I have served on the Bennington. What the hell am I trying to say? I've served on the board of the Better Bennington Corporation for probably 17 of the 20 years I've been here. I've served as president, as vice president, and as a member of the board. I have served on one of my good friends from Brooklyn in Bennington is a doctor by the name of Bernie Bandman. He is a psychologist who helps people who are going through difficult problems to solve them. I've served on his board, which is called Speak Sooner, probably for 12 or 14 years. And for some unknown reason, I guess it was Governor Shumlin first in 2012 and appointed me to VEPC. And he and Phil Scott have kept appointing me up till now, and Phil Scott recently appointed me again through 2029. So if I live that long, I'll have had some time on VEPC.
Great. I'd like to know a little bit about VEPC, because that's kind of where we're going to focus today. So if you could tell us what it is.
I wanted to give you a little background about himself while I was here. Yeah. VEPC is the Vermont Economic Progress Council. I believe it was started back in the late 1990s as a way to help communities in Vermont and help the legislature figure out how to get some things done, as in finding new businesses to attract to Vermont, helping communities and municipalities to upgrade their standard of living, upgrade perhaps their water supply, upgrade the kind of infrastructure things that every town works about. And I think over the years, VEPC has done a very good job in that. We've had some very talented executive directors. Right now, we have an extremely talented executive director, and I'll name her name. It's Jessica Hartleben, who is an attorney, a very well-schooled attorney, and she's actually lives in Bennington. We run into each other every once in a while downtown. We are a collection of citizens and two politicians in the sense that we must have one person from the Senate and one person from the House as part of the organization. And so they usually change every year and a half or 2 years. That is to say, they serve for a year or two, and then somebody else comes on. So we have an interesting group. Number two, a group I think that's very friendly, and it very much is looking forward always to find ways to help Vermont become better, help Vermont do what it does better, help Vermont communities to expand, to build better housing, to build better roads, to do better city or town communication, if you will, and signage, things like that. Things that may seem sort of kind of funky day to day, but those are the things that make a town vibrant and active and safe in many cases. So, am I answering your question? Am I
Yes,
telling
you
what?
are. So, Michael, is VEPC an independent agency like the Women's Commission, the Commission on Women, or is it just a board?
VEPC is part of the state government. It's part of the Agency of Commerce and Community Development. So we are a small group of 11 people with an executive director and an assistant director in a kind of a large part of the government.
So does VEPC make the final decision on who would get the TIF or the CHIP, or do they just do the recommendation?
We make the final decision on CHIP. CHIP, we have not decided on any CHIP yet because that is a new project for us that we started a few months back. But we make the final decisions on all tax increment financings. Obviously, we work with people in the Senate and the House, and we work with other folks in the government to make sure that we're all covering the same needed information so that when we approve a TIF, everybody's satisfied that we've painted all the right places and make sure that there are no holes.
So so you said it, there's now CHIP. So could you give our listeners, please, a little bit of background or a little bit of understanding about what TIF is and where CHIP comes in and what the differences are?
Sure. TIF, tax increment financing, TIF, is what we and other states offer their municipalities. It's a way to improve their towns, improve whether it's their streets, their roads, their housing, by loaning money over a number of years to the town to build itself again, and using those same years to make sure that the state, if you will, receives money back to pay for the TIF over 20 years. That's to my mind, that's a very generous way of doing it. Not too generous, kind of the right combination for me. I've seen TIFs working extremely well. Excuse me, I've got a cold.
Sure.
One of several of our model towns that I find I'm very proud of because I've worked with them. For example, St. Albans. St. Albans started a TIF in 2011, 2012. St. Albans has, I can use an old Brooklyn expression, St. Albans knocked it out of the park totally. From a town that was losing people, losing housing, to a town that is very fertile, very active, and is moving ahead on so many areas. That I'll drive up to St. Albans maybe once every other month just to meet with Dom Cloud, who is the city manager, and just say, Jesus, look, you guys keep doing it well. It's incredible. The same thing with South Burlington. The same thing within Burlington downtown, Milton, for example, and even in Barrie. It's interesting. in my time on the council, we've had two TIFs that did not work or that did not follow through. Number one was with Montpelier. Couldn't get its mind together on a TIF, and I think they blew a chance that would have been very good. The one that really bothers me still is in my own town here in Bennington. They wanted to do a TIF, so we gave them we put them through the ropes, if you will, in 2017, and gave them the right to have a TIF. And then we saw nothing happening. For 3 years, we saw nothing happening at all. And then they asked for an extended year on the TIF. We gave them an extended year, and at the end of that extended year, they said, "Oh, we decided we're not going to do a TIF at all." Now, Bennington is doing some construction changes around town, doing fairly well. But anybody that has done a TIF and seen it be successful, and they've all been successful, will say, and I'll say it frankly out now, that if you want to do a TIF and don't do it, and you find some other source, you've really missed out on a lot. Really
So I have a question, please. So let's look at CHIP, which is a different new model. And tell me, please correct me if I misunderstood. It's my understanding that with CHIP, the municipality has the right to bring forth debt. Also, I believe that's what the bill says, like they can go get debt. And I have a lot of questions regarding that. But first, could you explain the CHIP and why that is going to be the new model?
Community Housing Infrastructure Project. For three reasons, I think that for me, in any case, we know, number one, that there is not enough housing in Vermont for people who want to be here. We know, number two, that housing that's available is very often too expensive for people. Now, we know, number three, that if people can't get affordable housing, it doesn't matter what their job is. They just may move to another state to get a job where they can find affordable housing. Those are the three things for me that make CHIP very important. The financial importance of CHIP is that rather than having a municipality and the state work on this together, a CHIP can be doled out, if you will, to a construction company, to a village, to a group of neighbors wanting to make better housing at a more reasonable price.
I want to hear, can you explain that when you say a group of neighbors? So do they have to formalize themselves? Do they have to, do they need to formalize themselves in some type of entity, or does it not go to the municipality?
Yeah. Sorry to interrupt you. Everything that has to do with a CHIP has to go through the Vermont Economic Progress Council from the very beginning to the end. So anyone or any municipality or any group of people in a municipality sort of approved by the municipality that wants to do, I think I just lost you. Did I lose you?
No, you're here. You're doing great.
Oh, because I see an animal on my screen. Okay, well, that's all right.
No.
So everybody has to pass through. Everybody has to pass through the Vermont Economic Progress Council. That involves input from the municipality. It will involve sometimes input from the representatives of that town or county that are in the Vermont House, and it requires a lot of math doing to make sure, number one, that the concept of CHIP is understood, that it is community housing improvement, and it is not necessarily bound by some of the same restrictions that TIF might be, but it operates on some of the same, I would say, some of the same parameters as TIF does. It's just somewhat cheaper. There can be, how would I put it? Not many ways around TIF, but there can be many ways to use parts of TIF without using all of TIF to make a chip happen. And
Okay, so
we're saying a lot of this, or I'm saying a lot of this a little hesitantly because we still have not started any chip. The whole chip process started with us last year. As we said, there's got to be something, we can invent something to make it easier for smaller communities or for parts of communities or even for neighborhoods to improve their housing. Build better,
so
build
how
cheaper.
does Right. So how does VEPC go in? A municipality, say, applies for a TIF or a CHIP. How does VEPC actually vet the financials? I mean, it's easy to shift debt so your financials look good. We see that. We've seen that. And so how do you go in and actually say the people who have been in there are qualified? How do you vet these people?
That is part of the whole process. And in a sense, it's always part of the TIF process as well. We're just more familiar with TIF now as we have not yet done a chip. We look to see that the first chip we'll probably do may happen as early as July or August of this coming year. There may be something that happens before that.
Are there
But
already applicants?
I haven't seen any yet.
Okay.
We have a lot of how would I put this? The drums are being drummed in a number of municipalities and in a number of villages that are not big enough to be a municipality, where people realize, we need to do something to make affordable housing present in our area. How do we do it? Well, let's see how we do it with CHIP. They would not have the power, or they would not have the necessarily the ability to be awarded a TIF.
So does VEPC look, say, when they go to a municipality or a town, or whatever group is applying, do they look to see whether or not there's been enforcement actions, whether there's been water issues, whether there's been permit issues, like if what has really been going on historically and how that's going to change?
Well, historically, I can't give you any picture of that. But I know that everything we do when it comes to TIF and what we will do when it comes to CHIP is to make sure that the municipalities, villages, unincorporated villages even, and neighborhoods that want to do it will, number one, be schooled in exactly what it takes to do a chip. Number two, they will visit with us and we will visit with them on a formal and a frequent basis to make sure everything is okay. And that really is it. I mean, we are, again, and part of this is the fact that this is a TIF, but at a minor basis. So we're playing with some new cards, and we'll have to see what the first 2 or 3 chips, as they come down the road, turn out to be.
So a lot of the municipalities have charters and they require votes by the citizens. And so if citizens say vote to not do a TIF or a CHIP, can VEPC override that?
No, VEPC should not override what citizens decide in their meetings, in their municipalities or in their villages. If the citizens decide this is not going to work, or if we don't want to do it, then it doesn't get done. At least as far as I know, I've never seen a TIF that nobody wanted to get done. I would assume that the same thing would happen with intentions around doing a chip.
So you have some municipalities and some applicants who historically have had pretty bad financials, or just, never taxing, and then they kind of play catch up and then high taxes hit the citizens. How do those people get vetted? Because that management wise or leadership wise, there's going to be an issue there. So how is there, you have to have been in good financial standing for, say, 5 years, 10 years, 2 days. How does that work?
Well, whom are you talking about in terms of?
I'm talking about any applicant, the applicants. I'm trying to get a vetting process here.
Well, the applicant would have to be the municipality or part of it. Or the
Right.
applicant would have to be, for example, a neighborhood that a specific town or village said, yeah, you can try this, go ahead, to present their bona fides. That's what I believe is going to happen. And I say that I believe that's the way it's going to happen, because we have not had a chip yet. We are still in the process of finalizing the whole chip notion, and we want to have that to be able to start with the new year.
What about the TIF, though? Would that process be the same? How's the vetting process go there?
TIF is a larger, if you will, larger initiative, more time consuming and more costly than the chip. So we cover the TIFs very carefully, and our executive director, Jessica Hartleben, and her assistant director do a very, very, very good job of monitoring the TIFs. And we, members of the council, are at least 2 or 3 times a year visiting TIF locations, getting an overview from the local government and the local people that are in charge of the TIF, to show us what they have done, to show us what they're spending and what they anticipate to spend, and frankly, when they anticipate to be finished.
So how would you say a municipality applies for a TIF? How do you determine that that particular municipality is, I want to say, capable of even going forward?
Good question.
I know these are tough questions, but people want to know.
It's a very good question. I think that one of the things that we have always done is, rather than have the municipality come to us when they let us know that they're interested in the TIF, one of the first things we do is set a meeting with them in their town. St. Albans is a good example. South Burlington's a great example. So is Milton.
Rutland too, right? Rutland.
Well, Rutland is knocking it out of the park, and it's only had the TIF for less than a year, but it's so aggressively sharp. I have to take. I'm not going to have a hat on, but if I had a hat on, I'd take my hat off to Rutland right now.
But Rutland has a team. Rutland has such qualified business people making sure that their leadership is skilled, their internal operations are up to par. Rutland isn't just saying, oh, gee, I want a TIF, let me just flip my financials so I look good today. Rutland is really working it with great, leaders. So how do you go in there and make those decisions? It's tough to do it.
You've just really put the nail right on the head. When we at VEPC went into Rutland, not quite 7 or 8 months ago, to hear their plans for TIF, to understand their approaches, and to understand who is involved. And I said it the day that we went in, and I meant it, and I still do. Rutland was boiling with energy when it made its presentation to us, invited us all to Rutland, and we went there to Rutland. We watched things, we watched people, we heard so many of the right things that you want to hear from a municipality in making its case for the future. When we left there, Lyle Jepson, who was a business owner in the town,
He's our new commissioner, right? The new commissioner of economic development, right? He was just appointed. Mm-hmm.
This is a guy, and I'm saying this out of pure my own sense of people. This is a guy who will help Rutland knock it out of the park. There's no question about it. And the our president of the board at VEPC is John Russell, whose company, the Russell Company, is all over Rutland. He's a Rutland kid himself, not a kid anymore, and he has a lot of fingers in a lot of pots. He knows absolutely what's going on. So our level as VEPC, our level of confidence in the Rutland TIF is probably over 100%. Well, let's put it at 98% for the hell of it.
There you go. Well, excellent. So here's a question for you, Michael, because we know that sometimes projects may actually not generate, like cities may not generate the expected revenue to cover debt service.
Correct.
So historically, you have, say, some cities and other municipalities that have not done this, and all of a sudden they're coming in and go, pick us, pick us. Do you turn around and say, okay, just because this past week you generated some money, you're still not going to get this?
Say that again. I'm not quite sure.
Sure. So historically, we have municipalities that have not been able to generate enough tax revenue to just sustain themselves. And they're always raising their taxes just to cover their expenses because they're really not good at operations. And they have, this mentality of, well, we're not going to revamp anything. I mean, I've heard people say, oh, we have a new chart of accounts. Well, there's not a new chart of accounts. You just retire an account. It's not existent anymore. The key is to have people who understand accounting, who know where to post things. Okay, so I kind of hear these very, I'm going to say, bizarre statements to justify to people that their cities are doing well. So my main concern is, what if there is, in fact, not a history of being able to generate the tax revenue just to sustain your own city for years, and you have to keep raising and raising and raising taxes because those who are operating the city just need to be either changed, re-educated, or more sophisticated people brought in. So is there a longevity before? So if I come in and I've just, for the past 60 days, all of a sudden I've got good financials, are you going to look and say, okay, good, we trust you? I mean, where's the naysayer?
That's not going to happen. One of the things that is embedded in TIF, at any rate, is if there is a point at which the tax advantages of the TIF do not show up in the town, then the town has to make up that TIF money to the state one way or another.
And so how would they possibly be able to do that without just raising taxes locally?
They may not be able to do it without raising taxes locally if in a sense their TIF has failed or has not produced the revenue that A, they calculated, or B, they counted on. Then they're going to have to pay for the expenses of the TIF one way or another through their citizenry. Their taxes may have to get higher.
So can you get a TIF and a CHIP at the same time?
I can get a chip on my shoulder, but it won't work. Uh, that's a good question because we have never had a chip before.
Hmm.
We have focused on TIFs. The chip idea uh, arose this past year,
Hmm.
and frankly, all of us, or almost all of us on VEPC, number one, sort of fell in love with it, and number two, said, "Jesus, this makes sense." So
Okay.
it's a very new, it's brand new for us, and it's I want to say yeah it's a TIF but at a lower barrier, and
Hmm.
it's designed in a way that only certain parts of a municipality may want to use a chip, and they're capable of using it in their own neighborhoods. They pay
Hmm.
for it, uh, but there is no saying that they can't have a chip if they put the right application together with the right ideas and the right steps going forward. And if it if it fails or if it doesn't meet its standards, then that part of the town or the town itself has to pay for it.
So
It may pay for it
sometimes,
over a longer time.
right. So sometimes, Michael, TIFs fail because of poor project selection. Like, for example, TIFs could be used to enrich, say, special interests rather than benefit the public. So, what have you seen? Like, we know Bennington just decided not to go forward with the chip, but have we seen some that have failed? I mean, and also sometimes they fail because the locales are really not the encouraging development in areas that are least needed versus where they really should have the development done. What are some reasons that the TIF could fail?
Well, in order for a TIF to fail, it has to start, right?
There you go.
And in several cases that we've dealt with, for example, Bennington said, yeah, Bennington went through the whole application process, and it praised
Hmm.
itself at uh, at town meetings, and it praised itself at select board meetings every other week. But we have this TIF going. We're really gonna do this completely fantastic. And then 3 years later, they turn around and say, and I'm not going to name the person who did it,
Hmm.
uh, we're not going to do TIF anymore. We decided we're not going to do it.
So
There was
we
no
know
real
also,
reason, there was no real reason provided.
got it. Well, it's possible, I mean, sometimes it creates a financial burden for the municipality if the tax revenue just doesn't materialize.
Exactly.
And and that's huge. And also diverted funds, there's common failures for diverted funds from, we have schools, etc., and people who are not, say, compliance professionals running the internal operations may say, okay, well, I'm just going to borrow from Peter to pay Paul account, and then get into a situation that could cause the failure. And then the taxpayers have to come out, and boy, oh boy, they're going to get taxed like crazy, and it still may not be successful. So, why we have wonderful benefits, there's also these issues. What do you want to say about all that?
Well, the the one thing that
I
struck
just
me
thought I'd throw that out there.
there's an old there's an old I guess I heard it a few years ago. There's an old sort of there's a Father Brown approach. Father not being a
Okay.
priest, Father Brown being a the Farmer Brown approach. Who gets
Uh-huh.
on the TIF board, and at
Mm-hmm.
some point says, "Jesus, we can't do this anymore," and he sort of spreads a little bit of the how would I put it? Spreads a little bit of the discontent among other people, and they say, "Yeah, you're right. We can't do this anymore. We got to stop." That's a
Mm-hmm.
dangerous. to do, but it has. Let's see, where did it's happened in a town that I'm not even going to name, and it wasn't Bennington. It just happened
Right.
someplace else. People just argued, and they couldn't decide. They just couldn't decide what they would do. At the same time as the year before, they voted absolutely, completely for the TIF.
So the original intent of the TIF programming, please correct me if I'm wrong, was to actually stimulate private investment into these blighted areas, correct?
Correct.
For economic
Even if
revitalization.
the areas were not blighted, just needed to be modernized, or people had ideas about the future that looked workable, that's what they did. Yeah.
So does the water and sewer systems in the areas, does TIF also have money for that? I know CHIP does. Does TIF designate specific funds that you have to use to bring certain areas up to par, or TIF just lets you run with it on your own?
Well, you really have to, if you're going to bring an area up to par in housing, in terms of roads and stuff like that, road work and things like that go to the state or go to the community, the municipality. But there has to be money set aside for that, whether it's a loan from the state or loan from banks, to be able to make those things happen. Because you don't want to make a nice neighborhood which has no sewers.
So when, these places, these municipalities apply for these loans, because that's what this is, loan, when they apply for all of this debt, does the state say, well, I want to make sure there's a real engineer in there who's your, street operator, the officer there? I want to make sure there's a real CPA in place, or do they not say anything and let the towns or municipalities themselves make those decisions?
That's actually one of the things that VEPC focuses on. We need to know, and the state needs to know, that the right amount of talent and the right amount of funds may be available in the town to start things off.
Okay, so and we all know Vermont's small, and people have been working in these areas. Like, so I've had this job, say, for 20 years, or I've had this job for 50 years. Doesn't mean that they are able to go in there and develop a TIF. So VEPC doesn't.
You're right. It doesn't mean that they're automatically able to go and figure that out. You're right.
So, but VEPC doesn't make the decision and say, you know what, unless you bring somebody in who has these qualifications, we're not going to give it to you. They just can say no, correct?
Well, we don't go that far. We scrutinize, if you will, the team to make sure that the client, the municipality, or whoever knows that there is X talent that they need. We try to dialogue about that with them as they go through the process. And
so we know. So we know that, we know municipalities go out and, like, we know White and Burke's out there. They're pretty much the go-to people for TIFs, right?
The state White and Burke.
And there we go. So what I'm saying is, so White and Burke comes in and they try to do the sales pitch to you, where they kind of say, we can help you do A, B, or C. How much weight does VEPC put on White and Burke?
Well, I don't want to tell tales out of school. We regard them as a responsible organization. They have proven their worth in terms of helping various municipalities with TIFs and other improvements. But my sense is the state would be better off with more than one major organization. It would be better off with several good organizations that can help municipalities and villages in those areas without it being thrown to this one organization. And I respect White and Burke. I really do.
But you said, but it needs more.
We need more.
Right.
We need variety, a lot more variety, and we need a lot more eyes looking at things. And White and Burke generally works in again, I really like them. I like their people, but they work on one sort of a level, and you follow them fully, or you probably don't work with them.
So you turn around and say, I think, and tell me, doesn't VEPC also have these partnerships that get to be part of VEPC? And those partnerships are part of city partnerships with their friends on the board. So there's a conflict of interest, I would think, when they come in and say, oh, yeah, our city needs a TIF, and they're already partnered with the city. And so how does that work?
Explain that a bit more. Partnered with
Sure.
whom?
Sure. Doesn't VEPC have partnerships that are also part of it? Like outside partners that come in and say, we're part of VEPC appointed partnerships?
I've never run into that.
Okay, for some reason I thought that there were groups that were appointed that were also part of VEPC.
But there are times when VEPC calls in other experts. If
Right,
they
which
need
is different, which is excellent. That's
which is very
excellent.
different. Calls in
Yeah, which is
different.
different. I
Calls in
thought
a
that
non-appointed
there were
year.
designated partners, and I'll research that and I'll get back to you and we can
Yeah, find
follow
out,
up with
because
that.
I've never heard of us having purely designated partners that would be, giving
Oh, good.
the absolute no. And I've been on
So
the,
do the people of the state of Vermont have an opportunity to chime in? Like, how do they know who's going to get the TIF? Is that a point that application approval just happened and they just don't know until after the fact, or how do they
well,
find out?
I'm a little confused by the question when you say the they.
The people,
The they.
the residents themselves, they have to rely upon the municipalities informing them that in fact the TIF was approved.
Well, there are three things that happen. Number
Okay.
one, when a TIF application has been approved, the townspeople will know it if they read the newspaper or if they get the local news, because it usually becomes something that is announced at a select board meeting. So we
Okay.
have received a TIF authorization from the Vermont Economic Progress Council. That's generally the process, and it goes out in the newspapers. It goes out on whatever electronic media the town may use to inform citizens.
So can residents decide, can a single resident, we know how Act 250 works, like, I don't like what you're doing, I'm going to file something. Is there
No,
any way that residents can do that on TIFs?
to my knowledge, no. I mean,
Okay.
I would suppose if somebody thought they had the right amount of money, they might come at the town. They might come at the town council or at the select board with a lawsuit, but then they themselves will be paying for that lawsuit until something happens. And I don't believe I've heard any of that happening.
Yeah, so it's not a structure like Act
In a certain,
250.
in a certain Vermont municipality, something like that was going to happen a few years ago. And what happened instead is that the town just decided, no, we're not going to do a TIF now. And that was not Bennington. That was not
Right,
that.
right. I remember that.
No,
So I
no.
was just curious because I didn't think that there was it was written into the bill like Act 250. I just was curious. I think it's VEPC that makes that decision. VEPC works with everybody. VEPC does the due diligence. And there's a lot of time for this due diligence to happen. It's not going to happen in like 15 minutes.
No,
So,
and it'll happen probably for the way I see it, for every TIF that has come, the due diligence we have done carries on all through the TIF period. Whether it's
excellent.
10 years, 5 years, 15 years, our due diligence is based upon, okay, come in with your TIF, tell us what you're doing now, even though that TIF may have started 10 years ago, or what is your plan now that you've finished that part of your TIF? Was there something else you wanted to continue to do? is there an opportunity to do something else within the TIF?
So, what would you like our listeners to know about TIF, CHIP, or anything about VEPC? Anything you would like them to know? This is your shot before we have to sign off.
Well, VEPC is an excellent organization. It's all citizens from various parts of the state, plus an executive director and an assistant director. And VEPC is part of the government. And in my time on VEPC, I got to say this frankly, in my time on VEPC, I've seen very, very good people on the council. In my time on VEPC, I've seen a couple of people on the council that, with all due respect, a number of us were happy to see them leave when their term was up.
Mm-hmm.
But VEPC is a very good organization. It's well managed. We will partner with anybody who has a reasonable reason to be partnered with. We will provide as much assistance and help as we possibly can. And we are always at the ready to respond to any questions.
So here's a question. The executive director position for VEPC, does that executive director work for the state? Is she a state employee?
Yeah, the executive director is part of the whole organization of the government. Yeah,
Mm-hmm.
part of the Agency of Commerce and Community Development.
And the governor appoints the executive director?
Governor appoints the executive director probably through the recommendation of somebody else. But,
and does the Senate...
The governor appoints members to VEPC.
That I know, but the executive director, I believe, is also appointed by the governor's office. But do you know if once the governor makes the decision of who they want the executive director to be, if that gets run through the Senate as well, or it's just the governor who does the appointment? I think it's just the governor.
I would have to say, really, it is the governor who makes the decision. He will probably get a number of names anytime there is a person who leaves the council. There will be a supply of names for the governor to look through. And so his people will give him a number of names that they think are valid, and he'll make the final decision.
And you have been reappointed, and I applaud you for your service here. And this is fantastic because you come with such a wealth of experience and the history. But you're there through 2029, and we know you're going to live through 2029. And so how many terms, like, is it a 4-year term? Like, I know I was appointed as the women commissioner for another 4 years. And so how does it work? Is it for 4-year terms, 2 years? Is it alternating? Some people get 2 years, some people get 4 years. How does it work?
Well, in my case, when I was originally appointed, it was because someone was leaving the council but had 1 year left in his or her term. So I was appointed to that term, and then subsequently appointed by Peter Shumlin and by Phil Scott for 4-year terms. The last time Phil Scott appointed me was this past year, the 2029 4-year term, and the term before that was that was 2020 or 2021 to 2025. So I've been in 4-year terms. And that's great. I get a kick out of it. The people that I meet on VEPC from various communities and municipalities are just about great people. My colleagues on VEPC are really good people. And hell, I think it's fun.
Yeah. Yeah, well, it's great, and I think it's good that it's the 4 years, because you can't do projects like this and say, okay, I'm on for a year. It just doesn't work because you have to be vested into this whole project. And so it's important to see, begin it and see it through. And here's my final question, I guess. When a municipality or whoever's applying goes for the loans or the monies from the state, does VEPC participate in that vetting process, or is it, say, like just a bond company, or who looks at those applications?
That's a good question. I believe that in many cases, we will get knowledge of the applications. But if they're going, for example, going to a bank, the bank sees the application and it becomes private between the bank and the municipality. The bank, I believe, may share some parts of that, or if they have concerns, then they may share concerns about that with our executive director. But I haven't heard anything like that all the time I've been there.
Is there a cap on the amount of money that they can borrow? Like, is there a percentage, a materiality percentage when someone's applying for a TIF and where they can go and apply for the money, or can they just go do it?
Number one, they usually have to at least let VEPC know where they are applying for money. And essentially, when they're coming for a TIF, they're basically kind of applying to the government for money that will come out over years.
Right. And so if in fact they can't meet the payback and they have to go reapply and they have to start taxing the citizens, which is usually what the outcome is going to be, or they get desperate for cash flow, VEPC doesn't care at that point in time. I mean, you care from your heart, but I'm saying, but you don't.
At that point, we sell the community off to Iceland.
Okay, there you go, and then off you go to check on it, right?
No, we'll work with any community in any way possible to make sure that they pay and to make sure that they're up to date. But also, if they run into a community, for example, I don't know, Bennington or God knows where, or Manchester, or you could have let's say you're in the middle of it. You're in the middle of a TIF, and then you have a bad fire in your downtown.
Right. But so they just need to get it.
Pardon?
They just need to find the resources and make sure they can cure and keep it alive so it doesn't fail. I mean,
Exactly.
VEPC, yeah, right. Well, this has been fantastic, Michael, and I'm going to make you come back on, right? Because I'm just getting started on this area.
Well, you are a fantastic person.
Thank you. Thank you so much. So I want to thank NEK-TV. I want to thank Michael Keane for the phenomenal work you've been doing all these years and for our dear friendship. And, I applaud everything that you are doing for the state of Vermont. And so this has been Straight Talk Vermont with Linda Joy Sullivan, and we will see you next week.